All right. Hello, everyone, again, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Diana Ospina, and I will be your host for today. Today's topic is SAP Hybris Billing for subscription-based business models, presented by Arun Trividia. Arun is a director in Cognizant's SAP practice and leads the sales and revenue transformational practice in North America. Arun is a frequent speaker on related topics, including HANA, and has spoken at ASUG and Sapphire platforms. Now, without any further ado, I will pass this over to Arun to begin the webinar. Arun, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Jan. And I have started to share my screen. I hope everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
So we'll get started. So thanks everybody. Thanks for joining in, and thanks for that intro. So just once again, Arun Trivedi. I am part of the high tech advisory services with Genpact. Do a lot of work with SAP Hybris Billing and around the business models for subscription or recurring based business models. So today's session, what we'll be talking about is we'll see some of the trends in service monetization. So we'll understand what service monetization is all about. Then we'll see some of the industry trends in this world. We'll talk about the SAP solutions that are available in the market now. And then finally, we'll talk about how do we design a roadmap for your organization, because every organization is unique and they have their own business challenges to overcome. So we'll look at some high level approaches that have worked for some of the other clients that I have worked with. So this is how we'll be spending the next 30 minutes or so. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about service monetization. So really, what's service monetization? It's about trying to figure out a way by which you could have your existing products and services and offer them in a certain way. So for example, think about shaving cream, for example, or shaving set, for example, right? So we all know that Gillette is one of the most popular brands. We all go and buy Gillette from any of your favorite retail stores. So that's one way by which Gillette makes all these shaving brands available to end consumers. But what Gillette is also doing is they have started a subscription model, and many of you might be familiar with this. If you go to Gillette.com, you can actually subscribe to a service from Gillette, which lets you, once a month or based on the frequency, you get those products from them. But it's a monthly subscription that you pay. And when you actually get the product that you wanted, you don't pay anything for that one, right? So the same product is the same shaving set that we buy, but then it's being offered in a totally different way, right? So that's the model that we are looking at. And these models are becoming very, very common now. Another example is printers, all right? So Lexmark is a company that makes all these printers. But instead of selling printers to companies, they're leasing out or renting printers to companies, and based on the number of printouts and several other factors, they price it, right? So the same product is still a printer at the end of the day, but then the product is being offered in a totally different way. So that's the concept that we are talking about here. Now, so essentially what we're seeing in the marketplace is based on such models that it's very different from the way the products were being offered historically. So the same product, but then being offered in a very different way. It's being offered as a service rather than a product itself, which means that the whole buying experience, the pricing experience, the relationship that we have with the customers who are buying these services, that is very different from the traditional world. And we'll step into that shortly. But really what we're seeing in the marketplace is that a lot of companies are moving from being a pure product player to being a product and a services solution selling. So basically they're coming up with solutions, which is a mix of these products and the services, corresponding services, and offering them. And the way these services are being offered is based on a consumption or a usage or a recurring based business model. So for example, in a printer example, it could be, you take the printer from Lexmark and, you pay a fixed price every month. Or it could be based on the number of printers, printouts that you took in a given month, and those could be segregated as color printouts or black and white printouts, or what size of paper you're using. So as you can see, the complexity could just go on and on. The tiering of the price, it could go on and on. So those based on the consumption or the usage pattern. So the cell phone model, as we typically know, right, in which we pay our cell phone providers, that model is catching up with the rest of the world too. And then there could be multiple ways of monetization. So for example, in a printer example, it could just be on a monthly basis. It could be based on the size of the paper size or black and white and so on. So there could be multiple ways of monetization. And then we are also seeing revenue share models that are coming in. So for example, one or two companies, two or more companies could come in and offer a product or service. And then when you offer the product or service, there has to be a revenue share model. So think of, you're downloading a music or a song from iTunes, right, which is owned by, let's say, Sony. So when you download it from iTunes, you pay maybe 99 cents or $1, but then there's a revenue share arrangement that's being between Apple, which owns the iTunes, and then Sony, which is the actual content management, provides the content, right? So there is a revenue share model. So the more content you download, Sony makes money and Apple makes money, right? So there's a revenue share that happens. So how do we deal with that kind of situation? And then the other thing is, these are all because these are, the value of each transaction is small. The number of transactions is phenomenally high, right? Because there's so many more companies now. The affordability factor is reduced because people are not buying the product anymore. They're buying the service, which is monetized in a different way on a let's say on a month, on a annual basis, or this contract could be a couple of years. So the number of transactions that go up, number of customers that you have, the number of transactions that each customer has, that significantly goes up. And then the pricing complexity just adds to it. So we discussed one example about the printer, but if you think about it, right, the number of pricing models that we have, the pricing tiers that we have, those pricing tiers, go up. If you go back to a cell phone example, right, so our cell phone providers charges based on the hour of the day. They could run certain promotions on, let's say, Thanksgiving or Christmas or certain day of the time. If you make calls in the night or from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., there's a certain rate that's charged. So the pricing complexity, the tiering structure, those are significantly different in these kinds of models. And then tied to that is the billing and the invoicing complexity, right? So how do you invoice the customer? So you're making sure that, there's so many transactions that are happening. So all those transactions are captured the right way, charged the right way, priced the right way, and invoiced the right way, right? The customers could be having multiple products and services. How do you consolidate those multiple services you deliver for them? There's multiple usage items that the customers have in a simple fashion, so that they can see what it is and it makes meaning to them. And when they look at an invoice, they know what it means and they can easily pay you. Because if you run into dispute situations, it impacts your day sales outstanding. You could typically be high. Your customer satisfaction could be a problem. And then the whole customer experience around it, right? So you don't want to run into those situations. So you want to make sure that your billing and invoicing is taken care of. So as you can rightly see, so right from the way the products are modeled, which is the first bucket that you see, all the way till invoicing and cash and collections, right? There is a whole sophistication around the process that exists, and which could really make things very complex. So that all of that is, in simple terms, is a service monetization. Now, a lot of companies are trying various mechanisms. They're trying to create innovations around their products. They're trying to monetize their products in a different way. Sometimes bundling that with services to make sure that they're catching up with these trends. The one way it could be, the business drivers behind that are, increasing the number of customers that you have as of now, or the other drivers are, in multiple geographies, right? So it could be an expensive product. If you have it in this way, you allow your customers to subscribe to your services, then it becomes much more easy, right? And so many customers are trying to do that, and if they don't, the problem that they run into is, it could be loss of market share because your competitors are doing it, and if you don't, then you run into loss of market share. Because the competitors are doing it, and you're still trying to sell products, so your SG&A, your selling administrative costs, those could typically be very high. Your DSO could be high. You could be running into product obsolescence. Your products could become obsolete, or could be running into customer satisfaction issues, or if you do not take care of the billing situations, and if you do not have the right tools in place, then your employees are just running around trying to make sure that your billing is accurate, and so on and so forth. So right from a market risk to a product operations risk, right, to revenue risk, right, there are significant risks if companies do not take action. One is being able to monetize their product, and then having the right tools to monetize those products and services. There could be significant challenges on each front, which is why no company wants to be left behind, and there is an attempt to figure out ways by which this can be made possible. So let's take just about a minute to understand what is really different about the new model that we service monetization model, and the original or the traditional product-centric businesses. So if you think about each of these business processes, right? So think about customer interaction, for example, right? What you want to do is, because you're running into situations where you have increasingly large number of customers or consumers in the service monetization world, because the entry barriers are so less now. So even people with less kind of money or people with less kind of affordability can now afford your product. So you need to have more of a self-service type of mechanism, which means that if you had been let's say you have account executives who chase the large companies, but if you're running after, let's say, very small kind of consumers with who the transactions are, fairly low on a dollar value, you do not want to have a highly paid account executives, right? You want them to be more on the self-service side, so they could do a lot of the stuff themselves, right? The other thing is about the product as a service configuration. In the traditional world, it was just a product that you were selling, but in the services-oriented world, you have to customize your product and services to the unique needs of each customer or each consumer, which means that your products are dynamic. It could still be at the onset, it could still be the same printer, for example, right? In the Lexmark example, but then the way you could be pricing it, the way you could be configuring your product, for some customer, it could be just on a monthly basis. For other customers, it could be based on the number of printout that they're taking. For a third customer, it could be based on the paper size and so on and so forth, right? So you got to configure the product in a way that makes sense for the customers, and every customer could be unique. So that way you would have many more configurations to think about. The other thing is about entitlements and pricing. So we spoke about the tiered structure. So those are significantly different between the one world and the other world. In the traditional world, it was more perpetual products. So you buy a product, you are done forever. But in the other one, it's more consumption driven, right? So your pricing is more about consumption. How do you think about pricing from a monthly or a quarterly standpoint or a periodic standpoint? And then the nature of relationship with your customers are different. In the traditional world, you sell a product, you are done. But in this world, in the consumption-driven world, there is a constant interaction that's happening between you and the customer, right? So there is a customer certain life cycle. The customer will be up for renewals, right? So how do you make sure that you're following up with the customer for renewals? Because you don't want to lose revenue once the customer has signed up for, let's say, for 1 year. You don't want to lose them for the subsequent year. You want to renew them and potentially also upsell or cross-sell some of your services or upgrade them to a next level, right? So these are all the interaction points that you have with the customers, which is much more engaging than the traditional world. And then the management reporting, historically it was more around the business intelligence, but in the customer-centric business, it is more about the customer intelligence. How much do you really know your customers? Intelligence around them. Are they really using your product? What features are they using? So that you could design your products or you could upsell them in a way that makes sense to them. So long story short, the business process that we are used to in the traditional world is very, very different than in the new world, the service orientation world, which is more driven by customer centricity and not by the product centricity, right? It's all based on what the customers want and how do you design the product in a way that makes sense for the customers. So with that being said, let's jump into the SAP solution, which is the bulk of where we'll be spending our time on. So SAP's product is called the SAP Hybris Billing. Some of you may have heard the term, the SAP Hybris Commerce and the SAP Hybris Billing. And if you think about it, SAP has multiple products, but they're all interrelated and they work together in a way. And SAP has bundled the product, which is called the SAP Hybris Billing, which works end to end, right from the ordering situation all the way to the usage scenario and the ability to invoice the customer and for customers to make payments. Right. So at the very front end of the situation, you have the Hybris Commerce, where you have all the products and the business partners that are coming in. And, if you have products which requires inventory data, then it has inventory data with it, your product catalogs, shopping carts, and so on and so forth, which is purely on the side. Now, behind the scenes, you have SAP CRM and order management capabilities, which lets you, actually create the orders. And then you have ERP, which is a traditional SAP ECC that we know of, which has all the logistics and the order management capabilities in it. Then the new models that you see over here, which are SAP CI, which stands for Convergent Invoicing, and then the SAP CC, which is at the bottom of the screen, which is the Convergent Charging, which are the new components over here to support these kinds of business models. So what SAP CC does, Convergent Charging, is it lets you model for those kinds of usage-based or recurring-based pricing models. And it supports large transactions, huge transactions. So you could have millions and millions of data points coming in, and it could still rate them, identify what the charging logic should be for each of those consumption items that comes in. And then the CI, convergent invoicing, essentially takes all of those charges and it consolidates all of those charges into a billing document or an invoicing document that you can share with your customers for payments and others stuff, right? So this is an end-to-end solution that we have from SAP that takes care of right from the ordering and the catalog and the product part and the configuration part all the way till invoicing. And the new models that we're looking at over here is, one is the high transaction, and two is all the pricing tiers that we have, right? So SAP conversion charging really helps you model the different pricing scenarios or the pricing tier scenarios that you could have, all the variables, you could define all the rules in SAP conversion charging based on decision trees, and it lets you model all of those different pricing. Now, we spoke about the end-to-end picture, right? That's the big picture. But then really, the way in terms of how customers deploy them could be very different from customer to customer, right? So we look at three broad level options. And, of course, for your client situation, it could be very different. Or, it could be one of the variants or maybe a mix of these. But broadly, we see that there are three different options that most customers could choose from. The option number one is what I call the classical Hybris Billing situation, where you have SAP Hybris Billing with an FICA based model, right? The FICA stands for the contract accounting. So in that case, you don't use the FIAR, the account receivable, but instead use the contract accounting part, right? So that historically came with SAP Utility, but SAP enhanced that to work for situations like these, where clients are looking for high volume transactions. Then FICA comes in handy as the right solution to use in those situations where you really have high transaction volumes. So you could use the same Hybris billing solution, meaning you still use the SAP convergent charging, CC, SAP CI, the convergent invoicing, but at the back end on the core ERP ECC, you have SAP FICA, the contract accounting activated. So that could be one option. Option number two, which I've seen popular with a lot of clients who are existing SAP clients, because they use currently SD, the sales and distribution module, and they use the FIAR, the account receivables. So for those clients, option number two, and especially if they feel that the transaction volume is not too high, then they generally go with option number two, which is to use Hybris billing with SD and FIAR, right? Where the final invoicing that you do, it could be through SD. So that way you are leveraging your existing investments in your SAP module. You're not throwing it away. You're leveraging the existing modules, and you're only implementing the Delta part, which is the convergent charging and the convergent invoicing part. And then the final option three is where you really want to start small, where you want to start with incremental business value. You only want to focus on the billing challenges, not so much on the consumption, or maybe you already have another solution to deal with the convergence, the pricing and the rating calculations. You only want to consolidate the invoices, traditional product invoices and then the services invoices. And that's when the flexible solution billing, the FSB, comes in. And it lets you consolidate invoices in a way that makes sense for you, and then you can provide an output over the billing output over to your customers. So there are three broad level ways that options that exist for clients and customers to work with SAP on based on what option works best. And there is a mechanism by which we figure out based on the assessment that we do on what option works best. For clients, maybe there could be fourth or fifth option, that could be specific to your client situation, but broadly, these are the three options that we see in the marketplace. So what I'll do is I'll take maybe a couple of minutes to lead through each of these options and then talk through what the solution components for each one of them. So let's first talk about the SAP classical Hybris billing with FICA. Now, if you look at the process part at the top right, so the broad process is called the SAP offer to cash, which is broken up into two subcomponents: the offer to fulfill, which takes care of the order management, all the way to the fulfillment part, right? So the customer ordered, a product or a service, and here's how we fulfilled it. And then the second part is the consume to cash, which is based on, once the customer starts using the product or the user starts using the product, how do we measure what they're using? right? And then rate and charge it, and then invoice the customer in a way that makes sense for them, right? So in the printing example, for example, right? So we have installed the printer, so that's the fulfill part. Then when the customers start using the printers, right? So how do we measure the number of printout they're taking? What kind of paper and so on and so forth. And then those are all being driven into the pricing model that we have, or the rating model that we have. And then we rate them, and then we invoice the customer at the end of each month, or whatever the agreed upon frequency for billing could be, and then invoice the customer, and then they make payments. And we provide a mechanism so that customers can validate that whatever they're paying for is indeed the true picture, right? So there's no disputes over there. And then at the bottom, you would see, the corresponding SAP solution component, and at the very bottom, you would see, what each of these uh, acronyms stand for. So CC, for example, stands for convergent charging. So long story short, the core product modeling and the offer management is done between SAP convergent charging and SAP CRM. The mediation, which is the one that actually measures how much customers are using the actual usage, right? So that's handled by digital route with convergent mediation. There's actually a separate company, but it's very tightly integrated with the overall SAP solution, which is called the SAP CM, the convergent mediation. And then the core pricing rating, once the usage data comes in, right? So we have to account for the actual rating of each of those usage items. So those are done in convergent charging, and then they make their way to convergent invoicing, which actually consolidates all of those information that come in, and they go to FICA for the postings, invoice postings, and if you have financial management, then you provide a view of that to the customers, so they can look at what is the usage pattern in a way that makes sense to the customers. It's like looking at your utility bill, right? So you got to say, how did I use and how much did I use, right, each month. So it's a similar view that SAP provides to customers, so they can look at and make sense out of the billing information. So that's what we call as the classical Hybris billing with FICA. The next one is a similar model for Hybris billing. Let's say use SD, sales and distribution, and you already use FIAR, the account receivables. Then how can you leverage your existing SAP investments and still use convergent charging, right? So there's a component called the solution sales, and then the solution billing. The solution sales comprises of the core ordering part and the product modeling part, and you still use convergent charging to take care of the rating logic, and then the core order management, the sales and order management part, um, uh, which takes care of the core ordering part, right? And then the process is similar in this case, except that you use AR, account receivables, FIAR, instead of FICA, right? And then the final invoicing is through SD, SAP SD. Now the FSB component that you see over here, which we spoke earlier, stands for the Flex Solution Billing, which is on top of your ECC, right? You have to activate it, SAP FSB, Flex Solution Billing. What it does is it lets you create invoice packages. Those invoice packages could be coming from either SD, or if you have other components, other applications that are responsible for generating invoices. So it consolidates everything. FSB consolidates everything. And then there is automated workflow mechanisms, so that's to make sure that the invoices that you generate are indeed right. You're accounting for everything so that your customers will not dispute. And then the final invoicing could be generated out of FSB instead of core SD, right? And the backend, the account postings are still made in FIAR, not in FICA, but in FIAR in this model. And then the credits and collections, all of that are a standard part of SAP that many of you would be familiar with. But the core thing over here is using SAP. This model is it leverages your existing investments, and especially if you're not looking at hundreds and hundreds of millions of transactions to start off with, then FIAR might be the right solution for you because it leverages your existing investments. And if you use third-party tools, billing tools as well, right, for some of your business units, you could consolidate using FSB, the Flex Solution Billing, could consolidate everything into FSB and generate the invoices out of FSB. So that you're sending one single invoice to your customer, and there are less number of chances of disputes, and customers could pay on time, which means that your day sales outstanding it could improve. So those are all the benefits, and of course, customer satisfaction would likely go up with those situations. Now, next question is, how do I design a roadmap? And, there is no one right way of doing it, but just to give you some inputs on how, we generally go about doing this is, based on what your current focus is, the business focus is, right? If you just want to focus on operational efficiency, for example, right, then, you could be looking at FSB. It addresses just the billing part. It doesn't do anything on the usage part. But, if you have issues around billing that you have, you could just use FSB. If you have issues with day sales outstanding because you're sending multiple invoices to a customer, again, FSB could be your part. But then if you're looking at, solution selling, and if you're looking at, huge transaction volume, then you may want to consider the classical business, the Hybris billing, right? But if you could avoid that, you're only looking at, just making sure that you do solution selling, then you could be looking at the Hybris billing with SD and AR. And really, the key difference between the SDAR and the classical Hybris billing is essentially what you already have as part of a recipe component. Do you have FICA or do you not have FICA? And the number of transaction volumes. So those primarily are the key factors that determine whether you should be going with the Hybris billing, with SD and AR, or should be using FICA. And of course, there could be other aspects as well, but the devil lies in the details, right? So we could always go into a situation where we can discuss and figure out what the right approach could be. And at the bottom, you typically see, what the rough time implementation roadmap could be. FSB is actually a very quick win for customers who have billing challenges. The implementation is very quick. It's 8 to 12 weeks, not more than 3 to 5 months time. But the others could be more transformational in nature. Classical Hybris billing, it could be more transformational in nature. It could include larger teams, like apart from sales operations. I know it could include customer facing, could be finance operations, a lot of that, right, across the enterprise. Those touch the end across the enterprise. But typically, one of these options could be, if we could figure out what option works best for your situation. So that was the last slide that we had in terms of the core area. I know that we are very close to the end of time, so I'll summarize it very quickly. So what we dealt with in our session was, we spoke about what service monetization is and how is it impacting companies with some examples. Then we learned about the SAP solution that we have, and then finally we spoke about the deployment options that we have and how do we go about designing a roadmap. And again, this roadmap may not work exactly for your type of situation, but at least this gives you some of the options that you can choose from and what's available in the market right now. So that marks the end of, I think that was the last slide that they had, open for questions. Diana, over to you.
Great.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Arun. 1 second here. I have a question. So I have, how is S4HANA different from traditional SAP ECC?
Okay, so S4HANA is actually a new product that SAP has. It's the database that you see, right, in ECC. ECC could run on any database, right? It could be on SAP Oracle, it could be SQL Server, it could be IB2, it could be any database. So what SAP did in the last couple of years is they have come up with a new database, which is the HANA database, and then they have redesigned the whole product itself. It's a new code that they have written that works just with that database. All right. So what this means is that a lot of database capabilities that SAP could take. So they have done that. And then there's also significant differences between in-memory computing, right? So in-memory computing came up. So HANA, the database from SAP, is an in-memory enabled database. And then the whole program that the whole code that SAP has written for S4HANA is designed to be optimized for the database. So it works only on S4HANA. You cannot use any other database. It's very, very different from core ECC. And we can get into more conversations on S4HANA in another session.
Great. I have another one here. How does S4HANA support my business growth?
Yeah, so S4HANA, it does support a lot of the business growth in terms of, there are multiple things that we could do with S4HANA, right? So for example, if you think about, the way I look at it is, 4 components. There is a cost aspect, there's a revenue aspect, there is operational efficiency aspect, and then there is a people aspect. right? So in terms of the cost aspect, we see that because the way S/4HANA is designed, the total cost of ownership actually it goes down. So there's the cost aspect of it. In terms of revenue, there are a lot of things that organizations are moving towards in terms of what the IoT enabled or Internet of Things could mean for their business, right? So there are enormous revenue potentials around that, right? So all of those are enabled with SAP, the core digital transformation that we keep hearing about, right? In everywhere we go, right? So all of that is enabled, and then just given the whole integration that SAP offers with S4, so that is enabled, and then SAP has new UI for this, which is around the people experience, so which makes people much more efficient than how they have been so far.
Okay, and then I have another question here from Ahmed Ibrahim. It says, I am an SAP SD consultant, but I do not know ABAP. Can I be entered into Hybris? Note, I am not technical, which means I do not like to work with programming. Can I still take Hybris as my next SAP module?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hybris Billing, the way convergent charging is designed, it's based on decision tree structure. So anybody who's an analyst, right, who understands if else type things, right, you don't have to code anything in convergent charging. You could still move from SD to convergent charging. In fact, I myself have an SD background. I used to be doing SD. I still do a lot of SD work. And I have a lot of people in my team who had SD background and they moved on to Hybris Billing, and they have been doing very well. So absolutely, yes.
Okay. And I have another question here from VJ. Are there going to be more sessions or any training? I can answer part of that question, VJ. We do have, monthly webinars that we try to schedule out. I will send you the link to our monthly webinars and the topics that are available. As far as any specific questions on what Arun covered today, you can contact him directly. You'll also receive a copy of these webinar slides and his contact information. So anything that he discussed today, you can contact him directly for. Now, I have another question here from Camille. I have a FICA background in ISU. Now, Camille, do you have a specific question about that?
Yeah, so I guess if the question is more towards if I have a FICA background, then where does Hybris Billing fit in? So absolutely yes. So CI that we spoke about, convergent invoicing, is actually a function within FICA. So one of the things that somebody with a FICA background could do is learn more about CI, the convergent invoicing, and be a Hybris Billing consultant.
Great. And now I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We're going over a little bit here. This will be our last question from VJ. I'm working on Hybris Commerce. Will Hybris Commerce help to learn Hybris Billing?
So I would say the Hybris Commerce and the Hybris Billing, they have different skills. The Hybris Commerce is more on the front end part, and the Hybris Billing is more, once the order comes in, then all of the back end order to cash, more of that part. But they are integrated, of course. But if you're doing Hybris Commerce, then probably there is some likelihood, but I wouldn't say a lot, that you would end up being with a Hybris Billing, because there would be somebody else on the team working on Hybris Billing. You'd not be doing both in a project situation.
All right, and I believe that is it. Arun, thank you so much for your time and for this presentation. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We want to welcome you to our future webinars. You will receive a copy of this webinar as well as a link to our upcoming webinars, and you may also contact Arun directly for any questions you have on his presentation. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day. Thank you, Arun.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for the time, and Diana, thank you.